Hello, and welcome back to Wicked Wednesdays. After a long hiatus, I am finally back in the studio, or at least the studio as it is for now. A bit more on that later. For those of you that are returning to the podcast, welcome back. I know that I've been gone a very long time. I have had some big life changes that involved 2 moves, getting everything reset up, etc. It's been a lot. And I am long overdue in getting back to the podcast. Part of that was I truly wanted to have the new studio set up because I wanted there to be an unbroken continuity. But at this point, that seems a bit farcical as it's been quite a long time since our last episode. So the look of these interstitial episodes will look, a bit more relaxed, a bit more informal. But it's the same old podcast that you know and love. Hopefully soon I will get the new studio built, and you'll kind of come along for that process. Until then, I'm going to start putting these back out every week because I have a lot of things I want to talk to you about. If you are new to the podcast, the basic premise of the podcast is that I have been in the BDSM scene my whole life and the kink scene. I transitioned into the adult film scene, worked in that, still do work in that. Not as active as I was, but I'm hoping to fix that soon. And this podcast is an outreach to people that are interested in the BDSM and kink scene, the poly scene, kind of anything that falls outside of the traditional relationship norms. It's really a relationship podcast. That relationship can be between dom and a sub, or kinky people, or poly people. And I'm hoping to expand that even more. And I'm not going to limit the podcast strictly to things that ally with kink, BDSM, poly, etc. That will still be the primary driver of the podcast. But as I was speaking to my patrons recently, I don't want to shoehorn important issues and only look at them through the lens of BDSM. So while kink and BDSM, poly relationships can be a very broad palette for me to draw from, and I'm in no way limited or running out of ideas in that spectrum, I also don't want to have to shoehorn everything I talk about into kink, BDSM, and poly, if that makes sense. I don't think you're really going to notice the change in the overall tone of the podcast, but from the creative side, it does give me some more latitude to talk about things that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to without awkwardly shoehorning them into BDSM and kink. So, welcome back, and welcome for all you new folks. This is the segment of the show where I thank our new patrons and welcome on board new members of the Patreon family. Thank those that have special shout outs, read little messages if they want that read, etc. I'm not going to do that this week because in that long absence, I had a lot of people come and go on the Patreon website. I want to make sure that I have all of them accounted for. If you give one time, then you're a member of the Patreon family. I don't just take that privilege away. I want to make sure I get all those. And one problem I have is that I haven't found a way to see members that have left. So members that were at one time members and have now left. I want to make sure that I get everybody's call out. So I'm going to look and see if I can find something on an archive or some sort of way of looking back at past members of the Patreon to ensure that I have everybody's name read out. So next week, there's going to be a long chunk where I read out everybody's name to make sure that everybody gets their call out. And then we'll move forward like we normally do, where, we pick up 1 or 2 members a week if I'm really lucky. So if you have never heard your name on the podcast and you are a patron or you were a patron, just let me know. Send me something on Instagram or send me an email at hiswickedways@gmail.com. I want to make sure that you get your call out if you ever contributed to the Patreon. So that'll be kind of a fun, super Patreon readout. I've also always wanted to have one of those scrolling, thanks to our patrons in the YouTube version of this, if you're listening on podcast. And I want to have that created by next week too. And everybody that's ever been a member gets on that. I'm not going to read through every week and make sure that everybody's a current patron. I'm not worried about that at all. A lot of people will give for 1 month and then they'll cancel. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't expect you to continually pay for something. If you want to do a one-time gift, that's awesome. If you feel like it's taking me forever to get out new episodes, as it has for the last few months, and you want to cancel that, I completely understand. Don't blame you at all. For those of you that have stuck around, thank you very much. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate that. I am going to work incredibly hard to make sure that we have episodes coming out every week moving forward. Even if that means I take my camera with me and I do it from a bus station, which I've actually done before. Or was it a train station? It was a train station last time. But we've done them from hotel rooms. We've done them from ski lodges. We've done them from train stations. I think I did a Patreon update from a medieval Ren Fair feast hall one time. So yeah, I'm going to make sure these come out. It's very important to me to be consistent. And that long absence was very hard for me to get back in the swing of producing episodes. It was very easy to get in the rut of not working this. And I've missed it. I've genuinely missed having this opportunity to reach out to you guys. So with all that said, let's get into our topic for the week. I'm going to take the opportunity in this interstitial period, which I hope doesn't last more than a month or two, to address a lot of things that might have fallen by the wayside, get some of your questions answered, talk about things that I frequently get asked, kind of a FAQ, that kind of thing. And someone asked recently in a private discussion if I thought that BDSM could be therapy. The simple trite answer is no, because according to this definition, therapy sessions refer to structured meetings between a licensed provider and a client with a goal of improving some aspect of their life. Psychotherapy encompasses many types of treatments and is practiced by a range of clinicians using a variety of strategies. So no, on its base value, BDSM, kink, this lifestyle that we have is not therapy with a capital T. However, it is extremely therapeutic for some people. In the same way that exercise can be therapy, music can be therapeutic, art can be therapeutic, rest and relaxation, taking a cruise can be therapeutic. BDSM and kink can absolutely be therapeutic, but they do not have to be therapeutic. And that's going to vary quite a bit by the relationship that you have with your dominant or you have with your submissive in a strictly DS, power exchange, kink type relationship. Your kink play, your BDSM play may be just for fun. You guys just have some fun doing it. It doesn't get really heavy and emotional, and it's just a little extra spice, and that's fine. I think a lot of people get caught up in the notion of, they see certain BDSM relationships, these 24/7 power exchange relationships, or something that has, so much weight and seriousness to it, and that can be aspirational for them, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with the people that are in those aspirational type relationships where they have 24/7 heavy kink play, or they have a lifestyle where they're able to go out and play in public places every week or every month. A lot of us don't have that much opportunity for public play, etc. There's no wrong way to do this as long as everybody in the relationship is being taken care of, is having a good time, is being fulfilled. That's fine. So when I say that BDSM can be therapeutic, if you don't find that your BDSM relationship is especially therapeutic, it really depends on what you're looking for in it. That may not be a problem at all. If BDSM and kink for you is something that's fun and you don't want it to get really heavy, you don't want to feel like you're in a therapy session when you go to your BDSM partner, there's nothing wrong with that. Conversely, if you are in a relationship that is deeply therapeutic to you, nothing wrong with that either, as long as both sides of the equation are comfortable with that and they're equipped to do it. So this is one of the things that I wanted to really stress on in this particular topic, is that not every Dom is a therapist. Not every Dom has the capacity, capability, willingness, desire to be a personal therapist to their submissives. This is a very tricky area because when we do these power exchange relationships, as I've spoken about many times, trust is a huge factor in that. And that can be one of the most intense and trusting relationships you've ever had in your entire life. There are few things more suited to being in a therapeutic relationship than that level of trust. So ideally, A dom-sub relationship could be deeply therapeutic. However, as I read from that definition, and I myself, I'm not a licensed therapist in any way, and I try very hard to draw clear lines between what I'm capable of doing and what I should not be doing. And I do that every day when people ask me questions. I get lots of questions every day, through Instagram, through text messages, through comments on the videos, through emails that I get sent. People will sometimes ask me questions that are way out of my league because I'm not a licensed therapist. And even if I were a licensed therapist, I'm not their licensed therapist, right? It would be very unethical for me if I were a licensed therapist to give that kind of really important and meaningful personal advice and therapy to someone over the internet whom I've never met. That would not be ethical. And I don't do that. As much as I possibly can, I will try to be helpful and supportive and point them to the right direction. Sometimes that right direction is me saying, I really think you should talk to a licensed therapist about this because what you're describing to me is a serious issue that I can't help you with. Knowing when to draw that line as a dominant in a relationship with your immediate submissive, someone that you do know very well and you're in an intimate relationship with, knowing when to say this is beyond my capability can be incredibly hard for a dominant to do. I'm saying that from my personal experience of having gotten in over my head and not being able to provide as much support and as much therapy as I would want for that person to have. It's really hard to say I'm not able to do this, but that is really incumbent upon a dominant if they find themselves in a situation outside of the realm of their capabilities. So, what kind of therapeutic type things can a DS relationship offer? Well, let's look at some of the most easy and basic things that any type of beneficial activity can offer. Stress relief. You've had a stressful day at work. You can go for a jog. That can be therapeutic. You can work out. That can be therapeutic. You might sit down and watch a Lifetime movie with a tub of ice cream. Not the healthiest form of therapy, but some would consider that an okay coping mechanism as long as you don't overindulge in the Ben & Jerry's. Yeah, we all understand that. On a fundamental stress relieving, I'm going to go do something that is fun for me level, BDSM can certainly do that. BDSM should be fun for both people. Obviously, some of the things that we consider fun, other people would be horrified by. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not going to yuck your yum, and I want you to enjoy what you guys are doing, no matter what it is. As long as both of you are on board, it is all right with me. Both of you, most of you, some of you alls, there's a lot. When we're talking about kinky relationships, poly relationships, if I say both, I'm including all the possible number values that relationships can take. I'm not excluding us poly people. Believe me, it's kind of my bread and butter. For the most part, I try to keep it to a dom-sub, sub-dom dynamic because that's the core of our BDSM dynamic. So you're feeling stressed, and the idea of letting go of all control and giving that control to somebody else, like your dominant, can be very relaxing, very comforting. It can be a huge stress relief. And this dovetails in with something that I'm going to talk about more in depth, but I'm frequently asked by people, and they'll say, at work, I'm a very dominant person. I'm the boss. I'm in charge all day. How can I be a submissive? Because I also have submissive feelings. But at work, I've got to be, type A, in charge, have all the answers, tell people what to do all day. But when I get home, I want somebody else to make the decisions. I want somebody else to be in charge. How do I balance that strange dichotomy? There's nothing strange about that. That seems like a very balanced personal life to me. I've often said that BDSM, DS is on a spectrum. Doms and subs are on a spectrum. Very few people are at the far edge of that spectrum. I believe it looks like any other population-based bell graph where the majority of people make a big hill in the center and then it tapers out to the extremes. So yes, there are absolutely people on the extremes like me, super hyper dominant, and there are people super hyper submissive. Super submissive people, the very idea of being in charge makes them feel really anxious and uneasy. And super dominant people, they can't let somebody else be in charge. They don't have the ability to let somebody else be in charge. But in the middle, everybody in the middle of that spectrum is going to have desires that go both ways. Sometimes they want to be in charge. Sometimes they want to let somebody else make the decisions. And that's not weird. That's very, very typical. That's the meaning of normal, the mean right in the center there. So it's not surprising at all to me when somebody says, I'm very hard driving at work, but I also have these submissive feelings. How do I express that? What I've found is people that have that, very careful balance, that very clear balance between that desire and that comfort with being in charge, when they do want to be submissive, they're very selective on who they want to be submissive to. They're not just going to submit to anybody. They want to submit to someone that has earned their trust and their respect, whom they know when they gift their submission to that person, they are in safe hands. They are in good hands. They can trust the person they're gifting their submission to. Katja falls pretty well in that area. She is very submissive, but she's not submissive to just everybody. Believe me, I've seen her get very non-submissive to people in my life. And she wants someone that she can trust and that she can put her 100% confidence in so that she can let go completely and know that she's safe and will be taken care of. That's a big part of her submission. So yeah, don't feel like you're weird if you're that person. So tying that back into what I'm talking about, that can absolutely be therapy. That can be very therapeutic. You work hard all day, you're the boss all day, you come home, and now is your time to relax and be told what to do. And that makes you feel good. That makes you feel comforted. That lets you let go of anxiety and stress. You don't have to decide what's going to be for dinner because someone will tell you we're having this for dinner. As I always try to caution in these BDSM scenarios, what can be fun and joyful and fulfilling if it's consensual can be horrible if it's not consensual. There's a big difference between gifting somebody your submission and they tell you, all right, I want you to go inside. I want you to take those clothes off, put this particular outfit on, and then this is what we're going to have for dinner. In some relationships, that would clearly be a controlling, overbearing, abusive relationship if the person being told what to do didn't want to be told what to do. So let's always make that clear. And I know that, especially in our current political climate, some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about as a dom-sub healthy behavior will raise alarm bells because, oh no, that's the patriarchy keeping women down. That is not what I'm about. I never have been, never will be. The only people I want to tell what to do have welcomed me to tell them what to do. So do remember that. So yeah, if that is fulfilling to you, if that's comforting to you, if that makes you be able to relax and be like, awesome, I don't have to make any decisions. I like being told what to do in this scenario. That's a stress reliever that can really help somebody let go of the pressures of the world. So yeah, very basic example. Moving up a couple steps, for some people, things like impact play can be very therapeutic. And again, that sounds a bit weird. How can something that's either painful or really overstimulating to all the senses, how can that be therapeutic? How can that help somebody relax? If you've ever gone to a physical therapist, the notion of pain being involved in therapy should not be that foreign. But your response to pain is going to be very individualistic. It's going to be very situation dependent as well. Sometimes you really want that spanking, and that will make you feel good. It's something you've been looking forward to all day. But if you're not feeling it, it's not going to make you feel better. It's probably going to add more stress to you. That's a crucial dom-sub dynamic of communication, of your dom saying, I think it's time for a spanking, and you saying, that sounds amazing, or you saying, I really don't want to do that right now. Let's not do that right now. Nothing wrong with that in any DS dynamic. Can you experience this true release and this kind of floating, dreamlike subspace that you often hear about? Oh yeah, spankings can absolutely put you in that place. Again, your results may vary, just like it says on the back of the pill bottle, but I've certainly, in my time as a dom, done therapy spankings being different from punishment spankings, for example, where the sub hasn't done anything wrong to deserve a spanking, but they need a spanking. So that spanking is called a therapy spanking or a therapeutic spanking. Or maintenance spanking is also used in that way quite a bit. And it can be a very intimate, warm time between a dom and a sub. And the sub can be left feeling warm and cared for and floaty and relaxed and just drift off to sleep. I've done it many times. It would be awesome if it worked 100% of the time, but it doesn't. If there was a 100% success rate with spankings, maintenance spankings, therapy spankings, then licensed therapists would be writing out scripts to go see your local dom to get a nice therapy spanking. It doesn't work every time. It has to be administered properly with the proper level of stimulation, the proper length, the proper rise and fall through the spanking. It's kind of its own art form, but that is developed between a dom and a sub. That can be absolutely therapeutic. I will stand in front of the AMA or whatever the Association for Psychiatrists is and defend spanking as therapy. Not as punishment for children. That is bad and it does not help. But spanking amongst adults, consenting adults, I've seen it work wonders for relieving stress. Absolutely. I don't have any doubt of that whatsoever. Rope play can be very therapeutic. Again, a lot of these things, as I'm giving you examples of different BDSM activities that can be considered therapy, they all kind of fall into the same stress relieving, letting go of control realm. That I found in my interactions with people, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, a lot of things that, plague our modern society can be alleviated by the types of sensory and emotional stimulation that BDSM has. So whether that's a spanking, whether that's shibari or bondage, whether that is, really rough CNC type sex. In some ways it acts as a distraction, but that can be true of all these normal therapies, going for a run, going fishing, watching a movie. All these things are working on the same type of levers that BDSM does. BDSM tends to have stronger levers. That's kind of one of the advantages that I see in the therapeutic realm. A lot of the stimulation that we do can be very intense, and therefore it's really hard to worry about this thing that's been bugging you all day when you're tied to a St. Andrew's cross and you're being flogged. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. And the slow, controlled come down from that, the aftercare part of that, again, if that's done properly, if that's done with care, if that's done mindfully, very demure, then it can be something that is, again, it's all wrapped up in that therapy mindset. So these are all the positives, right? I personally believe that BDSM can be very therapeutic in a good, healthy setting. From the aftercare to the spanking to the intense stimulation that we can offer, there's nothing wrong with looking at it as therapy. However, the reason that I am really not willing to call it therapy with a capital T, again, aside from the licensure part of it, is there's a lot of things that people go to therapy for that BDSM can't fix. And that's why I think it can be very therapeutic. I don't think of it as therapy, if that makes sense. I've always joked that I'm a life coach with a crop. That is my style of BDSM play with my partners. I like to be someone that works with them on the things that they want to work on. So that can be anything. They're a very messy person and they want to be a very neat and tidy person, but they have a very hard time because they don't have that internal locus of control and that really strong willpower and determination to make themselves clean up their house. That is a great place for a dom to step in, right? So for me, that is the life coaching with the crop part of it. I'm willing to take somebody on, look at them, see their wants and needs, and help them facilitate those needs. I'm really good at that because I have that internal locus of control, because I have that strong willpower. I have that ability to tell myself to get up and get this thing done. So it's very easy for me as a dominant type person to take somebody that's a more submissive type person and look at where they're at, judge how much they can change, how quickly, bending, not breaking, and help them along that path. That kind of relationship can be very similar to a therapy-based relationship where you have a problem with anxiety and you go see a therapist and they give you tools to help you deal with that anxiety. Again, these are very closely allied in my mind. The very intense one-on-one focus of BDSM, and we have tools that traditional therapists don't have. I have the ability to say, or else, whereas your traditional therapist, your licensed therapist, can't threaten you with a spanking if you don't take your pills. There's, in my mind, a lot to be said for that. But again, as a BDSM practitioner, am I equipped to deal with someone's acute paranoia or their schizophrenia or other disorders that are far and away beyond, I have a hard time keeping my room clean? No. And that's where I think it's really important that BDSM practitioners like myself realize what we can help with and what we can't help with. Can it be therapeutic? Sure, 100%. I've detailed many ways in which I think BDSM and the lifestyle can be therapeutic. Some of you watching this or listening to this are going to think, but I've heard about so many bad BDSM relationships that have put people into therapy. Sure, I don't doubt that at all. The key is bad BDSM relationships, just like bad relationships of any kind, right? There's nothing more discouraging to me than when people blame the BDSM lifestyle and not the bad relationship, because it has nothing to do with the lifestyle. The BDSM lifestyle is one of the healthier, more progressive and forward styles of relationship that there is, because we're kind of aware that what we're doing is very impactful. So we tend to be very aware and very cognizant of things like consent, things like making sure people are consenting continually, that they're on board with the relationship through every step of the way. We teach people actively how to have good relationships, etc., as opposed to your wild relationship, your vanilla relationship, your non-structured relationship, where it can be great or it can be terrible. The idea that because it's a BDSM relationship, that somehow makes it harmful is really misguided, because you can absolutely have abusive, bad BDSM relationships that end up with people going to therapy for the rest of their life trying to recover from it. But they're not trying to recover from the BDSM. They're trying to recover from the bad relationship. And that is true of any style of relationship. So what's dangerous are human relationships. BDSM relationships, I don't personally feel are especially dangerous. But that's just me. That's my point of view. On the nature of dangers, as I was just saying, it's really incumbent upon the dominant and the submissive both to recognize the limits of what kink and BDSM can fix, can heal. When you get into things like childhood trauma, can BDSM play a role? Yes. I certainly won't say it can't ever play a role in that kind of thing. People immediately think of mommy issues or daddy issues that some people use BDSM to cope with. I'm fine with that. I do want to point out that a lot of people like to play mommy issue, daddy issue stuff, big little play, for example, that have had outstanding childhoods. They don't have a childhood trauma that they're trying to overcome. That's one of those things that it really drives me crazy, because it's this folk psychiatry thing that, oh, well, anybody that wants to be in a big little relationship, they must have had some kind of crazy childhood trauma. That's the only reason they could be comforted by this as an adult. That's nonsense. That's absolute hogwash. I know that on a personal level, where I've seen people that truly wanted that big little play, that age play kind of play, that had wonderful, fulfilling, happy childhoods, and they're still on great terms with their parents. I've seen people that had terrible childhoods also want the same thing. And I'm just one person. I don't believe in any way that everybody that likes big little play or daddy, mommy play, that kind of thing, I do not assume that they had a bad childhood. So, can it be a coping mechanism? Yes. Could that be an unhealthy coping mechanism? Also, yes. So that's where I would want people to tread lightly, just to be careful, to understand that if you do have some sort of deep childhood trauma, that is something that is best discussed with a capital T therapist, not necessarily your dom therapist, your dom therapy, your kink therapy. I'm sure there's an overlap, but that's got to be between you and your therapist, or you and your dom, to know that is what you're doing an unhealthy coping mechanism or not. That is true of everything. Just like I was saying with the Ben and Jerry's, it can easily become unhealthy. Drinking can become unhealthy. Trying to put too much into a DS relationship to combat severe childhood trauma can be unhealthy. Okay, so I'm saying that that is absolutely a possibility. It is not, however, the only reason people like to play like that. Some people just think it's fun. They think it's transgressive. They think it's fun because whatever reason, it's just fun for them. So don't judge everybody based on what you think is going on. That's just word of advice for everybody. Dominance, as I mentioned earlier, one of the hallmarks of a dominant is being confident. And we can easily be overconfident. We can easily say, here is this broken person, I will fix them. I have absolutely been guilty of this myself. Have I helped people? Yes, absolutely. I have absolutely helped people through BDSM, through a DS relationship. I've also failed to help people, and that's important. I have to be very careful because I do respect people's privacy, and I don't want to just lay out the details of somebody's life. But say when somebody's coping with addiction, I've been able to, as a dom, with someone under my full-time, care and supervision, keep them from indulging in those addictive traits for years at a time by literally being in control of, is there alcohol in the house? Are there pills in the house? Are these addictive substances available to this person? No. Can I prevent them from attaining them? Most of the time. Can I keep them on the straight and narrow, don't want to be addicted to path? Yes. But what happens when they're not under my control? And that is something that, we as doms, specifically talking doms to doms, sometimes we have great power to affect people's lives when we're in direct control, when we're holding the reins. But if you're a dom and your goal is to build a better sub, to help somebody achieve something, they've got to be able to do it when you're not in the room. So that's a philosophy that I would like doms to embrace and understand, and that it's really easy for me to tell someone, do this thing right now when I'm standing in front of them. It's another thing entirely for me to say, I want this done now, and I want you to continue to do this even when I'm not standing in the room for you. With simple tasks, that's a no-brainer. That's pretty easy. With something like addiction, that's where I don't think kink, dom, DS relationships, that's why we're not therapists. That's where it can take a much higher level of education, a much different regimen of both treatments and, say, medications to help someone cope with that kind of thing. So yeah, what I want doms to do is recognize that they are not all-powerful, they are not omnipotent, they cannot solve everybody's problems. And as a dom, that's hard to take. That is hard to take when you have to look at a situation and say, I'm not equipped for this. but it's absolutely your responsibility. Can you help somebody in addition to them seeing a licensed therapist? Sure, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I've had more than one sub that was actively seeing a therapist in addition to seeing me. And we kind of tag team off. They had their realm that they dealt with. I had my realm that I dealt with. And I encourage, this is something that is really important. I think a lot of DOMs get really skittish if their subs are seeing a therapist because there's a fear, of course, that the therapist is going to be very anti-kink BDSM. Some therapists are. I wish I could say that everybody's on board and up to date and understands that kink and BDSM and all these paraphilias are not necessarily mental illnesses, but there are certainly therapists that look at what we do as innately harmful, that there's no good that can come out of it. There are also therapists that are 100% on board with it. So that's going to be something between you and your therapist. As I always say, you got to be honest with your therapist. You got to be 100% honest with your therapist. And even if your therapist is 100% on board with kink being fine, with BDSM being fine, as long as it's done in a healthy way, they may have advice for you on your relationship. They may be able to tell you, hey, this isn't healthy. This isn't something you should be doing. I think that you'll be able to understand whether that's coming from a place of this person doesn't like kink and BDSM, therefore they think it's a bad relationship, or they're fine with kink and BDSM, it's just they think this particular relationship is unhealthy. So have the discernment to understand that. DOMs, you can't be afraid of your subs having therapists. That's, again, realize what you're able to do, recognize your limitations. Don't deny your subs the possibility of being healthy and happy. Even if that means seeing a therapist, that's not you. Believe it or not, we can't solve every problem for our subs. So a lot of what I've been saying has been directed at DOMs specifically, knowing that subs are listening to this at the same time. And so the advice that I'm giving to the DOMs is very closely allied to the advice I would give to the subs. Understand what your DOM can and can't do for you. First of all, make sure that your DOM is willing to have this kind of relationship with you. They may just want to have a fun type BDSM relationship. They may not have signed on to be in the BDSM as therapy business. That may not be their style at all. They may not be equipped for it. They may not have any desire to do it. So expecting that kind of care from your DOM, that specific type of therapeutic care from your DOM, may not be appropriate in your relationship. That's certainly something that you can talk to your DOM about. So let's leave it there for this week. This is a conversation that I'm going to continue next week in how BDSM can be a helpful therapy tool. It can be therapeutic, but it's not necessarily therapy in and of itself and shouldn't be considered therapy all by itself. Capital T therapy, licensed therapist type stuff. Longtime listeners of the podcast will know that once I get my teeth into a subject, I tend to be very exhaustive about it. So I have a lot more I want to say. Thank you guys very much for coming back. If you are new to the podcast, subscribe, drop me a line. I always welcome your questions and comments. If you are interested in supporting the show, go to patreon.com or go to my website at wickedfellow.com where you can find all of our links. The show notes will be there. And all the links that you would need to reach out to me or find our sites or find our Patreon page are there. As always, remember, consent is king. Take very good care of each other. And I'll see you next week.